All right, friends, so for today's tutorial, we're going to be talking about graph style book folding patterns, and more specifically, we're going to be looking at multi-layer patterns, and even more specifically for this tutorial, we're going to be focusing on two-layer graph style patterns. So when you start talking about multi-layers, you can have a 2-layer, you could have a 3-layer, 4-layer, 5-layer. Basically, the imagination is kind of up to you, but we're going to start out nice and easy today with the most conventional style of multi-layers, and that's going to be the 2-layer or 2-color, in this case, multi-layer style pattern. So as you can see, if we look at our preview image, the way that we can tell that this is a 2-layer is by looking at the different colors. So we have this black layer, and then we're going to have the other details that are in red, which will be our red layer. Now, for this tutorial, I'm going to break it down into 6 different parts because there are actually 6 different ways that you can fold this same pattern in a multi-layer style. So I'm going to list them for you quickly, and then I'm going to break each one down and we're going to go through them step by step. So the first one that we're going to talk about is going to be the most traditional and the most common way that people fold multi-layers, which is going to be that one part of the image is going to be embossed or sticking out from the edge of our page. And then the other piece of the pattern is going to be inverted or folded into the edge of our page. So that's going to be style 1. And then we're also going to learn how to do that same style of fold, the embossed and inverted, but in a 180 style, meaning that all of the layers are going to have a 180. Then we're going to talk about a double embossed, or basically what that means is both of the layers that you see here are going to be embossed or sticking out from the edge of our page, but at 2 different depths. We're going to talk about that, both with and without a 180. And then the last style that we're going to focus on is going to be the double inverted, which is the exact opposite, meaning that both layers are going to be folded into the edge of our page, but at 2 different depths. So we have 2 that are going to be embossed and inverted, 2 that are going to be the double embossed, and 2 that will be the double inverted. Okay, so we're going to get into that. Like I said, we're going to break down each style together. All right, guys, so for tools for this tutorial, we're going to be using, obviously, your chosen book. I have it in my adjustable folding frame. I am using the adjustable folding frame with the removable backing board that I offer. And the reason being is that we're going to have to score pages in order to get our different depths for our multi-layer. So having that backing board there makes a big difference when we go to score our pages. I'm also going to be using scoring guides. Again, I'll demo how I use these quickly. If you are looking for a more in-depth video on that, I have those available on my YouTube channel as well. But I will be using scoring guides to score my pages for my different depths. I'll be using my seam ripper to do the scoring. You'll also need a pencil to mark your pattern, scissors to cut your pattern. Obviously, you'll need your printed pattern. In this case, we're going to be dealing with a graph style pattern, again, 2 layers. I have printed the spined in version, and I'm going to be using my graph clip to hold my pattern in order to mark it a little bit easier. Again, demos for the graph clip and how exactly I break down marking all of this can be found in a different video on my YouTube channel. Okay, so now that we've gotten the tools out of the way, we're going to be talking about the first style of fold, which is going to be our embossed and our inverted without a 180. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at our preview image, and the first thing we're going to have to do is decide again how we're going to fold this, which we have, which is embossed and inverted without a 180. Then we're going to need to decide which pieces of this pattern we want to fold in what direction and assign to which layer of our pattern. Once we've decided that, we're also going to need to assign each layer a depth in order to fold to. So for this demonstration, we're going to assume that we want to fold our home embossed or have our home stick out from the edge of the page. And then we're going to want our red to be the inverted piece of this, which means it's going to be folded into the edge of our page. Now, the trickiest part about a multi-layer is going through and again, identifying the pieces of our pattern and assigning them a value. Once you get to actually marking and folding, things get a lot easier. So as long as you lay a good groundwork, as long as you label your layers properly, this step is going to be a lot easier for you. So this tutorial is actually going to break down how to do all of this, and you can apply this same exact method to other multi-layer patterns. So whether it's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 layers, as long as you follow these same steps, again, there will be more to it, you'll have more layers, but as long as you apply these same steps to your other multi-layer patterns, you will be successful in being able to fold any type of multi-layer pattern that there is out there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at our preview image and we're going to decide which order our layers need to go in order to get the desired look that we're looking for. So in this case, the outermost layer, so the layer that's going to stick out the furthest, is going to be black. It's going to be this home layer, right? So again, on the cover sheet of your pattern, there is the key. So you listed just like this: layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4. I think I have up to 6 layers labeled there. But I just jot down what my layer order is going to be. So the outermost layer is going to be my emboss layer, which is going to be my home. In this case, it is black. So I note what color that layer is. My second layer is actually going to be my background layer. So even though this is a 2-layer pattern, it's important to note that you have your regular colors that you see, but you also have this kind of hidden background layer as well. So in order for this to become embossed or stick out from the edge of our page, we actually have to physically fold the edge of our page. So in this case, our background is white, and that's actually going to be considered a layer for this multi-layer fold. So to get that effect, we have our black sticking out, then we're going to have our white layer. So that's going to be our layer 2 or our background layer. And then the last layer that we're going to have in this case is going to be our red, because we want the red to be folded deeper than the edge of our page. So red is going to be our last layer. So even though there's only 2 colors pictured here, it's very important that you don't forget that background layer. Okay? The next thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to decide how deep or shallow we want to fold each layer. So again, obviously we have them listed in order of, from the outer page to the deeper cuts. But next we're going to look at basically whatever book you're using and decide how deep or shallow you want to cut each layer. This is a lot of personal preference depending on the look that you're going for. Is going to decide how deep or shallow you want to make your cuts. Now, I do suggest 0.5 centimeters being the kind of shallowest that you go. I think anything less than 0.5 centimeters away from the edge of the page tends to get a little tricky to fold. So I do suggest going 0.5 or deeper for your first layer, regardless of whether you're doing a 180 or not. So just a little kind of tip or trick there. I think anything less than that toward the edge of the page just gets to be a little bit too finicky to fold. So with the margin of my book being so deep here, I could kind of play around with this a little bit. You can decide if you want your embossed to not show text, maybe the edge of your page to not show text, and then your inverted, maybe you want the text to show through. So we would pick a value that is deeper than our margin, if you want the text to show through at any of those given points. And if you don't want the text to show, you would choose a value that is obviously less than your margin for whatever book it is that you're working with. So for today's video, I'm going to be choosing 3 depths that are actually before my text. And it just happens to be the 3 size scoring guides that I have on hand here. So those are the 3 that we're going to work with. So what I'm going to do is we're going to assign each of these a value. Now, because we're not doing a 180, our first layer is not going to be folded at all. So our outermost layer, or our embossed layer, is going to have a value of 0 because we're not actually folding the edge of our page back for any reason. So our first layer is going to have a value of 0. The second layer is going to be our white layer, so that's going to be our background layer. For just personal preference, I'm going to choose a 0.7 centimeter depth. And then our red layer, which is our deepest layer, I'm going to assign a value of 1.2 centimeters. So for this particular pattern, for this particular book, I'm going to have to score at these 3 values. So obviously there's no actual scoring at 0, but it's a good way to kind of get your brain wrapped around it. So you want to score at all of the values that you have listed on your key. So I wouldn't have to score at 0, but I am going to score at 0.7 and 1.2. So for this demo, I'm actually going to use a multi-scoring guide. I'm going to make sure that my pages are stacked up at a really good 90-degree angle here. And I'm going to work this page with my seam ripper. I'm going to score at 0.7 and I'm going to score at 1.2. Again, there's no need to fold at or score at that 0 value, okay? The next thing that we're going to need to do once we have our pages scored, you would work your way through the book and you would score all of your pages at whatever depth that you have chosen. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to mark our page. So you're going to set your key aside here, and regardless of whether you're doing a 2-layer, 3-layer, 5-layer, 12-layer, you are going to go through and you are going to mark every single color on your pattern. So it doesn't matter whether I had 7 colors of the rainbow on here, you're going to mark the top and bottom of every single mark that appears on your page, regardless of color. So I'm just going to pick a random page for us to work with today. One that has not a ton of marks, but does showcase both colors. So let's go with this one, and this is page 455. So just to remind myself, I'm going to write that here. Obviously, you guys won't have to do that. I'm going to simply line up my graph clip at the bottom of my pattern, and I'm going to mark the top and bottom of every single mark that appears on this page, regardless of color. My hands are a little sticky, so please bear with me. And again, just to preface this, I'm working with my book fairly far in front of me, so that way it's like in full view of the camera. So if my marks or my cuts are a little off, please don't judge me. Please know that this, you want to get this as accurate as possible, but working so far in front of me, it's a little bit difficult. So again, we're going to go through, we're going to mark all of our marks regardless of color. Now, here's where things get a little tricky. So once we've done that, we're going to use our pattern as our guide here, and we're going to look at basically what I'm going to refer to as an intersection of color. And what I mean by that is where 2 colors meet, and this is going to be where we have to cut our pattern. So for our first intersection, it would be this first line here. We have a white piece of our pattern touching our red piece of pattern. And we're going to look back at our key and we're going to say, okay, we have a white piece of our pattern that is touching our red piece of our pattern. We're going to cut to whatever the deeper depth is. So whatever 2 colors are touching, whatever that deeper depth is, that's the color that we're going to make our cut to. So in this case, if our white is touching our red, we're going to cut to 1.2 centimeters. Once we get down to this part of our pattern, we have our black touching our white. So we have our black value of 0, our white value of 0.7. We're going to cut to our 0.7 score mark. Does that make sense? If we, not that there's one photoed here, but if we had a black piece of our pattern that was touching our red, if we had black touching red, we would simply cut to the red mark. Now, I know that there's going to be people out there that are going to say, why don't you just cut every single tab to the deepest depth and then fold them all to whatever the value is for that color? The reason that I'm going to encourage you guys not to do that is basically for the structural integrity of your folds. Now, there's plenty of people out there that do that. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but I'm going to say the reason I don't is because once you get into multi-layer folds that have lots of layers to them, those tabs become very unstable when they are cut to a depth that is deeper than they're folded to. So if you have two really shallow folds next to each other, but they're cut very deep into your book, when you close your book, those tabs may sit a little bit cockeyed once they're actually folded. They're not going to have that structural integrity of having that page be as solid as possible. And when you have really small tabs, if they're cut very deep, even if they're not folded very deep, again, you've taken some of that structural integrity out. So it's just a good habit to get into. I think it leads to a cleaner, better outcome when you don't cut necessarily to that deepest mark. So again, this is how I fold. This is how I'm going to teach you guys. Do with that information as you will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut these marks to those depths that we just talked about. So my red and white intersections, I'm going to cut to my 1.2 because that's the deeper. The black and white, I'm going to cut to my white depth, which is the 0.7. And then my red and white down here, again, I'm going to cut to my 1.2 centimeter. And again, I'm working with my work a little bit far away from me. So I'm probably going to cut past what I probably should, just because it's a little bit difficult for me to see. And when you guys are doing this and you're working on top of your work as you should be, you actually can leave the pattern underneath the page and just slide your scissors along and use the pattern as your gauge as you go. Again, I'm just working with my work a little bit further away from me for demonstration purposes, so bear with me. All right, so once you've made your cuts, we're going to take our pattern and we're going to fold to these same depths. So if we find our pattern page here, I'm going to use my seam ripper, just how I tend to fold things, and we're going to use this as our color-coded guide. So the first tab that we have here is going to be white. Our white depth is 0.7 centimeters. So we're going to take our page and we're going to fold it to our 0.7 centimeter mark. Our second tab is going to be red. Our red is 1.2. So we're going to fold that to our 1.2 depth. Next tab is white. We're going to fold that to 0.7. Again, this is a little bit difficult to do so far away. Then we're going to have a red tab, which is 1.2. We have a white tab that is 0.7. Then we have a black tab. Our black tab is valued at 0, so we're not going to fold that. White, we're going to fold to our 0.7. Red, we're going to fold to our 1.2. And then the bottom is a white tab, so we're going to fold that to our 0.7 centimeter mark. So you're just going to work your way along your pattern and you're going to fold to whatever value depth that pattern shows you. So this is what we're left with. I cut a little bit deep on that one. Again, I'm not working on top of my work, but you guys can see that I'm left with this edge of my page here. That's our white value. I have pieces of my pattern that are inverted, which are going to be these two tabs here and this tab here. And then I have my black value, which is this embossed tab here. So this is how you would fold every single page of your pattern. You just simply work from one side to the other, identifying the colors of your tabs as you work and folding them, or cutting and folding them to whatever value is on your key. All right, so we're going to change gears a little bit here, and I'm going to show you how to do the same exact page and the same exact pattern with a 180. And this is super simple, especially once you have the fundamentals, which we do. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to look back at our pattern And we're going to do the same thing we did before. We're going to identify our layers, we're going to assign them a value, and then we're going to cut and fold to those values. So again, we're going to stick with the home being the furthest out, our embossed layer. So that's going to be our black. Then I want the edge of my page, which is my white. And then we're going to focus on the red, which is going to be our inverted. So we're just going to go through, list them from furthest out to furthest in, including our background layer. And now the only thing that's going to change from when we did the non-180 to our 180 is now our black tab is going to be assigned a value. Excuse me. Our black tab is going to be assigned a value. So for this particular purpose, I'm going to stick with the 2 numbers that we worked with last time, and I'm going to add a deeper depth, again, just because that was the size scoring guides that I happen to have on hand. So these are oftentimes the sizes that I tend to like to fold as well. So for my black layer, we're going to assign it the smallest value, which in my case is going to be 0.7 centimeters. My next layer is going to be the next deepest, which is going to be, in my case, 1.2 centimeters. And my deepest is going to be 1.7 centimeters. I tend to like about a 0.5 or less depth difference between my layers. But again, a lot of this is personal preference. So it's whatever you guys feel comfortable doing. It's whatever works for your book and whatever outcome you're looking to have. So we're going to set our photo aside. And we're going to score our pages to this particular depths here. So I have 3 depths, so I need 3 scoring guides. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to make sure again that my book is pressed all the way up against my spine. I'm going to score at my first 2 layers, which are 0.7 and 1.2. And then I'm going to come in with my deeper guide, which is 1.7. Typically, I would have my book secured to my backing board here, but again, demo purposes. And I'm going to simply score to that 3rd depth. Now, you guys can work all the way through your book and score all of your layers first. That's typically what I do. But again, I want this to be repetitive. I want you guys to be able to see this over and over again. So we're going to work one style at a time. I'm going to go through and I'm going to set my key off to the side, and we're going to do our, let's pick a different, let's do, try to find a not super complicated page, but let's do this guy. So we're going to work our way from one side to the other, and we're going to mark the top and bottom of every single mark. I was going to originally do the same page with you guys over and over again, but I think it might be beneficial for you guys to see different pages just so it doesn't get so repetitive. So if we consult back with our key, when it comes to cutting, so we've marked all of our marks regardless of color, and now we're going to come through with our scissors and we're going to cut to whatever depth it tells us to. So our first set of intersections, all these intersections up here are going to be red and white, because here we have white touching red, we have red touching white, white touching red, red touching white. Then for this set of intersections, we have white touching black, so we would cut to whatever is deepest. So for these intersections, our white and red, if we look here, white and red, red is our deeper value, we're going to cut to 1.7. For this set, our black is touching our white is our deeper value, we're going to cut to our 1.2 centimeter. Okay, so for these guys, they're red. I'm going to try to do this without cutting too far past here. Again, it's a little difficult. Please don't judge. Or judge, that's fine too. And again, you can usually cut this with the pattern kind of sitting under it. I just can't actually see that at the moment. So if we were to do this, let me see if I can, just to kind of demo this for you guys. What page did we work on here? It must have been this guy. So you guys can actually, if I can lean around this a little bit, let's see if I can do this on screen, but you guys can actually snip with the pattern underneath there. And a lot of times that's what I'll do. So this is a black touching white, this is a black touching white, and then these guys are red down here. So you guys can go through and just kind of snip along here as you guys go. And again, try to cut just past your score line. You don't want to go too far past your score line if you can help it. I've probably cut way past on these, but again, demonstration purposes. All right, so next we're going to go through and we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to just fold our layers. So with our key handy, we have, again, we're going to fold to whatever color tab we're working on. So this particular one is white, so this is 1.2. So we're going to fold to our 1.2 score mark. Our red is going to be 1.7, which is going to be our deepest fold. We have a white tab, so that's going to be 1.2. We have a red tab, which is our 1.7. We have a white tab, which is our 1.2. Now we have a black tab. Now in the last version, our black tabs had a value of 0. Because this is a 180, we have a 0.7 value. So we're going to fold that to our 0.7. Our white is going to be 1.2. Our black is going to be our 0.7. White is 1.2. Red, 1.7. And I'm sure that you guys are getting sick of me saying these values over and over again, but hopefully the repetitiveness will show you guys how easy this really is. So it doesn't matter, again, if we had 12 different colors on this singular page, it does not actually matter because we're just referring back to our key and folding and cutting to whatever value that we have assigned that particular color. All right, so hopefully that takes a little bit of the fear out of this for you guys. So it's a little bit difficult, to see, but hopefully you guys can see that. So we have the edge of our page here. We have some inverted tabs and we have our embossed tabs. But in this case, our embossed tabs also have a 180 fold on them. Now, the reason that I teach it this way versus folding your 180 and then marking and folding your patterns is because of the fact that, again, it creates good habits. So if you guys are doing patterns that have more than 2 colors in them, it's a lot easier to not fold your 180 and then try and decide what you have to unfold or refold and all of these things. It's broken down very easily step by step. And again, it's almost foolproof. If you follow these steps, I guarantee that it will be an almost foolproof process for you. So let's switch things up and let's talk about a double embossed. We're going to start with a no 180 and then we're going to cruise right along and do our embossed or our double embossed with a 180. Okay, so we're going to do the same exact thing, and I'm going to start going a little bit faster here because I think, again, once you guys get the hang of this, you guys will understand how easy this really is. So the only thing that's going to change if we want to change how we want to fold this is where our layers are oriented. So if we want double embossed, meaning we want our black and our red to both protrude out from the edge of our page, we need to list them in that order. So we need to make our black, again, we're going to work from the edge of our page to our deepest layer. So the very edge of our page, again, the most embossed is going to be our home, which is going to be black. Then because we want the red embossed or sticking out as well, but less so than the black, we're going to list red next. And then the last layer is going to be the edge of our page, which is going to be our white layer. Can you guys see the difference there? Again, we're going to assign them a value. So because we're not doing a 180 fold, we're going to leave the most embossed layer, which in our case is going to be our black, with no 180, no fold. We're going to assign it a value of 0. The next deepest layer is going to be 0.7, and then our deepest layer, or our page edge in this case, is going to be 1.2, and these are all measured in centimeters. All right, so we're going to score to all of our values, which again in this case is going to be only 2. Set our key and everything off to the side. Take my scoring guide. Make sure that my pages are stacked up at a good 90 here. We're going to score at 0.7 and 1.2. Now I'm using a multi-layer score guide here. It doesn't matter. You can use all single scoring guides. It's totally fine. It does the same thing. Then we're going to, again, mark our pattern. So let's choose yet a different page. Let's do something with smaller tabs. So we'll do a little bit more of a difficult one. Actually, you know what? Let's not do that one because that won't show up great on camera for emboss. Let's pick one that has some bigger tabs in it. This one's a little bit bigger. We'll choose this one. Again, we're going to mark the top and bottom of every single mark on our page. And then we're going to use our key to decide how deep to cut. So things have changed a little bit here. We have white intersecting with red, but now white is going to be our deeper depth. We have white intersecting with black, but white is still going to be our deeper depth. So it just so happens that because of the breakdown of this particular page, white is always going to be our deeper depth. Now, again, if we had a piece where the red and black were touching, if our black and red were touching, we would only cut to our shallower depth, which in this case happens to be 0.7. So again, it just so happens that all of our marks intersect with white at one point or another. So we're going to cut to our deeper depth, which is 1.2 for all of our marks. And you guys will have a lot of patterns that tend to work out that way. So it's kind of nice when that happens because you guys can just go through and cut to your deeper depth because those are the depth that the tabs need to be folded to. So we're going to cut through and we're going to cut to our deeper depth on all of them. And let's see if we can figure out, I think it was this page. And we're going to go through and we're going to make our folds. So our first tab is white. So in this case, white is going to be our deepest depth, which is our 1.2. Then we're going to have red, which is 0.7. Oop, and I missed that cut. Which page was it? This one? So we have our red, which is our 0.7. We have white, which is our 1.2. We have red, which is 0.7. White, which is 1.2. This is not as easy as it looks on camera. Our black, which is going to be a value of 0 because we're not doing a 180, so he's going to stay alone and by himself. White and red. And then we're going to finish our page off with white. So if I were to flip this over, now you can see that we have the edge of our page here. And then we have two layers. We have our red, which is sticking out from the edge of our page. And then we have our black tab that is sticking even further out from the edge of our page. So both of our colors are embossed, but at different depths. And again, our tab is not 180'd. So moving right along, I'm going to show you guys very quickly how to do this with a 180. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to look back at our image and we're going to identify the layers in which we want to do here. So we're going to do the outermost layer, which is black. The next emboss layer is going to be our red, and then we want a page background, which is going to be white. Because we want to 180 everything, we're going to assign our black the smallest value, which in our case is going to be 0.7. The next deepest is going to be our 1.2, and then the deepest that we're going to cut is 1.7. Okay, again, I'm going to start going a little bit faster here because, again, this is all the same, just assigning things different values in different depths in a different order, depending on the look that you want for your book. Oop. So again, we're going to need to score. Now for this one, we have values of 3. So we have 0.7, 1.2, and 1.7. So again, I'm going to make sure that my pages are all stacked up at a nice 90. I'm going to take my scoring guide and I'm going to score at all 3 values. Just like this. we're going to mark our pattern. Let's pick, this guy. And I think for time purposes, we're going to ignore that there's red marks down here, and we're just going to play with these guys up here. So if I look back, I have white touching red. My deeper depth is going to be my white, and I have white touching black. My deeper depth is still going to be white. Again, if I had red and black touching somewhere on this page, there's no worries. I would just cut to my deeper depth, which in that case would be red, and that would be my 1.2. So in this case, all of my marks are going to be cut to the deepest point. Just happens to be the way that this particular page worked out. There are actually no parts of this pattern that intersect, so I'm always going to have a color and a background piece touching. But a lot of patterns do have that setup, and they tend to be a little intimidating for people. So it's nice to show kind of what you would do in that situation. So again, we're going to look at our key, and we're going to start folding on one side. The first tab is white. That's going to be my 1.7. So we're going to fold to that depth. Then we have a red, which is our next deepest, which in this case is 1.2. We have white, which is 1.7, 1.2 red, white. And the further along in the patterns that you guys get, the easier that this will come. It'll kind of flow naturally. We have a black tab. That's our shallowest depth. That's going to be our 0.7 because it's a 180. We have our white, which in this case is 1.7. And black, which is going to be, where's my score line? It's a little bit difficult to see here. Let's see. There we go. And then our white tab, because we're going to pretend those bottom red ones don't exist for time's sake. To white. Now, if we flip this over, it's going to look very similar. So we have some black tabs that are sticking up and 180'd more than the red tabs, which are also embossed, but they are 180'd at a shallower depth. So you can see the edge of the page here. You can see our red tabs embossed, our black tabs embossed, and in this case, our black tabs have a 180 fold. The advantage to doing the 180 fold on all of your layers just helps build a little bit of bulk and rigidity within your page tabs. All right, so cruising right along to our last style here, we're going to do a double inverted, meaning that we're going to have the edge of our page, and then we're going to have two different depths that are folded inverted. We're going to have one layer that's folded deeper than the other, just like we had for the embossed, but the other way around. So in this case, the outermost layer is actually going to be the edge of our page because we want everything folded in to the edge of our page. So our first layer is going to be our white layer. Our second layer is going to be the one that, again, we want cut the shallowest. So that's going to be our black. And then we want our red cut the deepest. So that's going to be our last layer. If we assign all of these a value, we're going to have no 180. So when we have no 180, our very first style or our very first value is going to be 0. The next one in this case is going to be 0.7 and 1.2. Now again, these are the values that I am using. You can use whatever values you would like to work with your book. Set this guy off to the side here. Take our book. We're going to score at any value that is listed on our key. In this case, we have 2.7 and 1.2. We're going to set our key off to the side and mark and fold our page. So for this, we're going to mark the top and bottom of every single mark that appears on our page. Again, for time purposes, we're going to pretend that the bottom of this doesn't exist, because I think you guys get the gist at this point, but I want to demo every style so there's no questions. So we're going to look at the intersections of our tabs. So this is white and red. Red is now our deepest value. We have white and black. Black will be the deeper value. So for the red intersections, we're going to cut to 1.2. The black intersections, we're going to cut to 0.7. So we're going to have 1.2, 1.2, and 0.7. If we line our pattern back up and we start folding the same way. So we have a white tab to start. Our white value is 0, so we're not going to fold the edge of our page. The next tab we have is red. We're going to fold it to 1.2. The next tab is white. White has a value of 0, so we're not going to be folding her. Then we have another red, which is 1.2. We have another white, which is valued now at 0. We have a black, which has a value of 0.7. And then we have the rest of our page, because we're going to pretend those don't exist. So that would be a white tab, which would have a value of 0. So if we look at the back of our page here, we now have the edge of our page here. Both of our pattern pieces are inverted. We have our red, which is deeply inverted, and we have our black, which is slightly less inverted or slightly more shallow. Again, none of our furthest most tabs, so in this case white, the edge of our page is not 180'd. The last one that we're going to take a look at here is going to be our inverted with a 180. Again, if we look back at our photo here, or our preview, we're going to have white being the outermost layer because we want the edge of our page on an inverted to be sticking out the furthest. Next, we're going to have black be the next deepest, and then the red be the deeper value. Because we're going to do a 180, all of our layers have to have a value. So we're going to start with the shallowest, which is 0.7, the next deepest, which is 1.2, and the deepest that we've been working with today is 1.7. Now you guys could do a 0.5, a 2, a 5. It doesn't matter what value you assign these as long as you go in order. All right, so for our last guy here, we're going to score at all of our values. So in this case, we have 3 values that we need to score at. Don't mind my mess in my thing here. Not taking very good care of my book or tabs, but this is just a book that I do all of my demos in here. So I've scored at those 2 values, and now I'm going to come in with my deeper value and I'm going to score again. I'm going to take my pattern and we're going to make some marks. So if we line her up and we mark the top and bottom of all of the marks on our page, we're going to start at one side and work our way across with our scissors. We have white and red together. In this case, red is our deeper value, white and black is our deeper value. So we're going to cut to our red depth, our red depth, our red depth, our black depth, which is slightly less, and our black depth, which is slightly less. So, and you see how I can do that. Again, it's a little bit tricky with the camera, but you get the point. So in this case, we're going to have a white tab. So because we're doing a 180, we're going to assign that a value and we're going to fold that to 0.7. Our red is still our deepest, so that gets folded to our 1.7. White, red, oop, I clearly missed a mark or missed a tab or something here. We're going to pretend it's there. Red, we have a white tab here, and then black is kind of our middle value here, and then the last tab we're going to pretend is solid white. So if we flip her over, you're going to see that we have basically the same thing we did on the last page, but we have the edge of our page here, which is now 180'd. Then we have our shallower depth and then our deepest depth. Now, and you might be asking, why would you do 2 inverted layers? maybe you want to add color to one layer, but you want to also have a inverted layer that doesn't have color. So if you did a shallower cut for an inverted layer that doesn't have color, and then did a deeper layer that you then added color to, either set in or up against the edge of the page, whatever your preference may be, it's just a good way of giving another kind of three-dimensional look to your book. Double inverted also looks really good with one layer being inverted where the text doesn't show through, and then one layer where the text does show through. So it actually gives almost a shadowed look within your book without actually having any sort of shadow feature, or adding color. You're actually adding color because of the text of the book. So I think that's kind of everything. Hopefully I've answered most questions. Hopefully I've given you guys a little bit more confidence in doing these multi-layer patterns. Again, I have demoed a 2-layer or a 2-color style today, but again, if you follow these steps, if you use the right tools and you use the right methodology behind it, it doesn't matter, again, if it's a 2-layer, a 5-layer, a 6-layer pattern, as long as you list your layers in order by color and then in order by depth, and just take it one page at a time. Again, if you guys have any questions, I have a Facebook group. You guys are welcome to ask questions there. I will put the link to the Facebook group in the description box below. But feel free to also leave questions in the comment section for anything I didn't cover. As far as the tools that I've used today, the folding frame, the scoring guides, the graph clips, all of that stuff will also be listed. You can purchase them on my website, but I'll list all that stuff in the description box below as well. And other than that, again, if you like what you saw today, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me to continue to make these videos breaking down these different book folding styles for you guys.